I now declare this 6th meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in order. Colleagues, as previously agreed, today we're holding a public hearing on the published public accounts that are before us. Before we begin, if I could just do a little bit of housekeeping, a reminder to colleagues that next Monday has been designated committee business. Work plan because we don't have anything beyond the end of next week, so I'm assuming that will be the major focus of that meeting. A reminder also that Tuesday is the tabling of the AG Fall report, and that the lockup in this room. Lockup is in this room at 7:30 a.m. Your staff are able to come in. They can't come out until after 10 o'clock when the report is tabled. There will be an informal meeting chaired by myself on behalf of the Auditor General at 9 o'clock, and it will run until 10 at the latest. The next day, that being next Wednesday, November the 27th at 3:30, our regular time, the Auditor General will be here to present his report, and we will have 2 hours with him in the usual fashion that day. Might I also point out that Ms. Duncan is replacing Mr. Sims today. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here. And that Mr. Weston is replacing Mr. Adler. So, again, welcome. Unless there's any interventions from colleagues, I'll proceed with the order of the day. And that would be to welcome our guests. We have officials from the Office of the Auditor General, from the Treasury Board Secretariat, and the Department of Finance. It's my understanding that Madame Cheng, on behalf of the Auditor General, as the Assistant Auditor General, will read an opening remark, and I'd ask you to introduce your delegation at that time. And the same with Mr. Ralston, the Comptroller General of Canada, and I would ask you to introduce your delegates. And although there's no presentation from the Department of Finance, Mr. Robidoux is here, the Assistant Deputy Minister, and will be participating in questions and answers in the usual fashion. So, with that, we will turn to Ms. Cheng. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you. Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie de nous.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to discuss our audit of the consolidated financial statements of the Government of Canada for 2012-2013 fiscal year. I am accompanied today by Louise Bertrand and Karen Hogan, co-principals responsible for the audit. We thank the committee for taking an interest in the public accounts of Canada. This is an important government accountability report. I will focus my comments on our audit opinion and observations. As you are aware, the public accounts of Canada are tabled in 3 volumes. Our audit covers the consolidated financial statements. These statements, our independent auditor's report, and our observations are contained in Section 2 of Volume 1. Unless otherwise noted, the information in all other sections of this volume and the 2 other volumes is unaudited. Our independent auditor's report on the 2012-2013 consolidated financial statements can be found on page 2.4 in Volume 1 of the Public Accounts. This marks the 15th year that we have expressed an unmodified audit opinion.
We provide an opinion on the government's consistency of application of its accounting policies. Our independent auditor's report reflects the changes in the government's accounting policies related to tax revenues and transfer payments. These changes were made because the government has adopted new public sector accounting standards in those 2 areas. They have been properly presented and disclosed in Note 2 of the consolidated financial statements. Our observations in past years have highlighted concerns about the financial reporting of inventories and asset pulled items, or repairable spare parts, at National Defence. Last year, we indicated that National Defence was working on several initiatives to improve its financial reporting capabilities. In this year's audit, we continue to find significant errors and noted that limited progress had been made by the department in implementing effective compensating controls and processes to improve the recording and valuation of its inventory and asset pulled items. Mr. Chair, we have been reporting concerns about those items at National Defence for 10 years. We wish to re-emphasize the importance of taking action and actively monitoring the completion of these improvement initiatives. Given the nature and value of inventories and asset pulled items, significant errors increase the risk of misstating the consolidated financial statements and making decisions without accurate information. Our observations also included certain other matters that we have reported on for the past several years. Some of them still require further action. Nous tenons à remercier le Contrôleur Général.
We thank the Controller General and his staff, as well as others in the departments that were involved in preparing these accounts. A great deal of work was involved, and we appreciate the cooperation and assistance that was provided to us. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer the committee's questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now over to Comptroller General James Ralston. You, sir, have the floor.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation to appear before the committee to discuss the public accounts of Canada. I am pleased to be here in my role as Controller General of Canada.
Mr. Sylvain Michaud, Executive Director, Government Accounting Policy and Reporting, and Mr. Michel Vaillant, Senior Director, Public Accounts Policy and Reporting. Also with us today, Mr. Benoit Robidoux, Assistant Deputy Minister, Finance Canada, and Mr. Doug Nevison, General Director, Economic and Fiscal Policy Branch at the Department of Finance. For the 15th consecutive year, the Auditor General has issued an unmodified opinion on the government's consolidated financial statements. This testifies to the high standards of the government's financial statements and reporting. I would like to thank the Office of the Auditor General for the continued professional working relationship that we have enjoyed. I would also like to take the opportunity to highlight a few elements that impacted the Government of Canada financial statements during 2012-2013. During the year, the government retroactively adopted the new standards of the Public Sector Accounting Board regarding the presentation of certain tax expenditures that are no longer netted against tax revenues but are reported as transfer payment expenses. Tax expenditures that provide a financial benefit through the tax system and are not related to the relief of taxes paid or payable are now shown as transfer payment expenses. Tax expenditures that reduce taxes paid or payable are considered tax concessions and will continue to be netted against the applicable tax revenue. L'impact de ce reclassement sur l'état consolidé des résultats et du
Impact of this reclassification on the consolidated statement of operations and accumulated deficit is an increase to both tax revenue and transfer payment expense of $3.1 billion, $3.2 billion in 2012, with no impact on the annual deficit.
Adopted the revised accounting standard of the Public Sector Accounting Board regarding government transfers. The main impact for the government was to stop recognizing advance payments as non-financial assets and to recognize them instead as expenses. The impact of these changes on the financial results was an increase in expense of $500 million in the current year. In addition, the Government of Canada has revised its approach for the recognition and measurement of accumulated sick leave entitlements. As a result, for the first time, the government recognized a liability for accumulated sick leave entitlements that are anticipated to be used in the future. In the past, sick leave benefit expenses were recognized when benefits were used by employees, and the government did not record a liability in its financial statements. Le passif représente l'obligation du gouvernement.
The liability represents the government's obligation for the accumulated sick leave entitlements that are anticipated to be used in future years. It does not represent the cost of sick leave benefits that have been used during the fiscal year or up to date. As a result of this restatement, the opening balance of other employee and veteran future benefit liabilities, net debt, and the beginning balance of accumulated deficit of the Government of Canada have increased by $1.4 billion.
Some media reported in early 2013 that the sick leave liability for the Government of Canada was $5.2 billion. Now, this amount represents the total value of the accumulated sick leave entitlement. It does not take into consideration the anticipated future usage. Since sick leave entitlements cannot be cashed out, and it is unlikely that all public servants would exhaust all their accumulated sick leave entitlements in the future, the liability for accumulated sick leave is less than the total value of the accumulated sick leave entitlements. We are now available to answer questions of the committee on the public accounts of Canada. Thank you.
Very good. Merci. Very well. We will now begin our questions and comments in the usual fashion, beginning with Mr. Albus. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank all of our guests for being here today to offer your expertise, and obviously we appreciate the service you do to the country to make sure that, again, as Mrs. Cheng said earlier, this is a key accountability measure for parliamentarians and thus for the public. So certainly appreciate you being here. In regards to that, this is the 15th consecutive year that the Auditor General has issued an unmodified opinion on the Government of Canada's consolidated financial statements. Could you please comment on what this means for Canada?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we have mentioned actually in the past, this is rather rare in terms of the global situation on financial reporting at the government level. We're not aware of too many jurisdictions actually have clean opinion on consolidated accounts, let alone having 15 years of consecutive record like so. The closest I think we could find would be New Zealand and Australia, whereby they have consecutive unmodified opinion for about 4 or 5 years, but not anywhere close to what we have here in Canada.
Well, excellent. I'm very happy to hear that, Mr. Chair. Now, the government's clean audit testifies to the high standards of the government's financial statements and reporting. Can you please share with this committee the requirements needed for the government to achieve this opinion? And are so-called clean audits common in the rest of the world? I know you did say that Australia and some other areas are working towards the same standard. Could you just comment a little further on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It requires a lot of due diligence on the part of the various departments and agencies that have a role in preparing the financial information. First and foremost, there needs to be the proper systems and processes to capture the data. There needs to be good systems of internal control to be able to ensure that the data collected would be valid. And then there needs to be the central exercise, which is under the charge of the Controller General, to make sure that there's proper consolidation, proper elimination of accounts. And where there are significant accounting judgment on estimates and on more complex issues, the Controller General would work on those to be able to make sure that we follow the standards. So the auditor's role is in turn then to look at those accounts and make sure that we obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to support the accounts to make sure that there are no material misstatements to the consolidated financial statements.
When I was back in my constituency last week, Mr. Chair, I actually was speaking with one of my constituents about my new role here, working alongside my colleagues on both sides on public accounts. And one of the things that they brought to mind was that, the fact that we're looking, at last year's books at this juncture. And I think that goes to say, going back to what you said, there's a number of accountability measures, and you have to work with the Comptroller General to be able to do that. So could you just explain a little bit more, when would you start planning to be able to put all these things in? Because it sounds like, to me, it's a considerable amount of time and energy to put together this kind of accountability document.
In terms of the preparation time, that probably would be best answered by the government officials themselves. From an audit perspective, I could sort of relate to my experience about a month and a bit ago when we were just closing off all the documentation on the current public accounts, that my staff was already in my office asking me questions about planning for the 2013-14 audit. So the exercise is really quite involved, and both sides starts rather early in terms of looking at this. One of the things that we do is that notwithstanding the accounts are clean, there are no observations that would prevent us to provide that clean opinion, there usually would be discussion about areas of improvement. So some of them, if we can have conversation early, then we can help the government perhaps make those modifications early on in the year, rather than coming in and tell them at the end, so that improvements can be made a bit earlier. So we start conversation with the Controller General's office, and separately at the departmental level, there's a lot of conversation that's ongoing still relating to the public accounts audit.
Well, I certainly appreciate your testimony here today, and again, the work that the Auditor General does for the people of Canada, as for parliamentarians in general. But just if there's anything further you would say to the people that are back home right now, anything that you think that they should further know about, so that they can be rest assured that all of these figures are accurate and are according to the highest standards that we have here. Is there anything else you'd like for people at home to hear?
Mr. Chair, I don't think there is anything more that we can say aside from having an unmodified audit opinion. I think it needs to be appreciated as to what that statement means. So when we say that we have 15 years of consecutive financial statements without modification or qualification in the old days, that's what you would call them, it is quite an achievement. So I think if we appreciate the value of that statement, I think the message would be well communicated.
And how much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
Very, very brief.
Okay, well, very, very brief then. Now, I understand also the Auditor General does work with other international colleagues, other countries and whatnot. Is these the kinds of things that people seek out the Auditor General's expertise on?
Mr. Chair, from time to time we do have international groups visiting our office. So the equivalent of our office, the national audit offices of other countries, they would come and try to find out what we do here in Canada. So certainly we would share what we find, our discussions, the kind of work that we would do to verify controls with them. And along the way it would be made known and clear that we actually are able to express clean opinion year after year here in Canada.
Very good. Thank you. Time's expired. And now over to Mr. Allen. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to folks. And I'll stay down at this end so I don't share the unpleasant cold that I have. But let me in the vernacular give kudos to what used to be called the bean counters, in the sense of making sure that the numbers jive and actually look after the beans, if you will, because clearly that's who deserves the credit, the folks who work behind office walls somewhere out in the bureaucracy, as we call it out there, who are clearly 15 years of a clean audit is high marks and high praise for those folks doing the work. So if you could take that back to your colleagues and your departments and say that, you know, as the official opposition, well done. They've done an exemplary job, obviously. But there are a couple of troubling things, Ms. Cheng, in your report. National defense obviously is a sticking point. 10 years now, they've said they would do better at their inventory control. 10 years they've failed to do that. And they're now saying, I believe, according to your report, they're suggesting sometime in 2016, maybe we'll get to it. I recognize this is somewhat of an opinion piece, but do we have any evidence, at least, that they're on their way to perhaps getting to that goal in 2016? Or is this the Defense Department telling us again that, well, we're working at it, but we don't have any evidence that they're working at it?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. Basically, the reason why it was 10 years was because in about 2003, the government adopted accrual accounting. So national defense being such a huge department, it was a very significant exercise to be able to transition. And they were having issues with respect to looking at fixed assets, tangible capital assets. And then inventory control becomes an issue as well along the way. So it stands to reason that it would take them a fair chunk of time. Having said that, though, we felt that 10 years probably the time that they should be able to do better than what they're doing right now. So year over year, in the observations section, we do comment on the fact that they still need work in terms of the area of inventory and asset pull items, because every year when we do our audit, we actually have significant adjustments. So if you're adjusting the accounts that significantly every year, it means that there are still some systemic problems. In terms of, I guess, what they're doing, I understand that they've actually filed a response to the committee about a month ago. There was a recommendation that this committee actually has made in reaction to the observations we made last year. And that report was filed about a month ago, indicating that they're working on a number of initiatives leading up to 2016 and going a little bit beyond. I think the chart I saw was 16-17. So this would be something that we would want to look at in the current year's audit to see if they're on schedule. They have made movement on some of these improvement initiatives, but the improvement initiatives are broader than just inventory reporting. They get into inventory management and maybe other aspects as well. So when we come back to the issue of inventory reporting, they really haven't gone very far. And the important point is— I got
one other question. I recognize the report actually isn't here. According to your notes, because we prorogued, the government prorogued Parliament, it actually won't come till the end of November. And so we actually don't have it, it seems, according to this. We may, unless the clerk has received it, we don't actually have that report yet from Defense. But let me—
You want to comment?
The prorogation didn't affect the tabling of government responses to reports in the previous session, so it was provided to members and has been distributed.
Okay. Then I'm still foggy. I have another question on CBSA, Canadian Border Security. According to the current status in your chart, 2008, a report to the Standing Committee of Public Accounts recommended the agency provide the committee with a detailed plan, and this is all about GST, HST collection, taxes, reconciliation of how much have they collected, how much should they have collected, and doing the things they're doing. Clearly, you indicated that they weren't doing it really well for a while. They were having discrepancies. So now CBSA is saying, you know, you've said they've done it a bit better, and now CBSA is now saying, well, we know we told this committee, the members of this committee in 2008, we were going to get this done. We're now talking, according to CBSA, well, we'll get back to you March 31st, 2015. Now, seems a bit gratuitous to sort of drag it out that long, but does this seem reasonable to you in the sense of, are they on their way to getting this done? Do you see evidence of that? Because I think, Chair, quite frankly, it's something this committee should take up, that if this agency committed to us in 2008, it's now 5 years later and will be 7 years later according to their present timeline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CBSA, in terms of the question that was at hand, it was really having to do with reconciling their usual revenue systems with the bigger general ledger for financial reporting purposes. What they have done in in the recent years, in the last couple of years, was trying to do a lot more of these reconciliation to see how they can bring the numbers together. And those numbers seems to be improving. That's why we put it in the table and not put it in the main text of our observation, because we can see movement. The part that they actually responded to this particular committee at the time was that they were going to implement this accounts receivable system, which would really help in terms of being able to do the subledger and the general ledger reconciliation. And the first date that they provided was March 2013. So it wasn't saying that they will finish in 2008, but they said that the system would be in play by March of 2013. Since then, there's been one delay. It was then told to us that it would be October 2013, and the latest date that we've received from them is March 2015. So hence, in the paragraph here, we indicate that it would be important. It still requires some attention, and that it would be important that they follow through and be able to complete it as planned.
Very good. Thank you so much. Time has expired. And now over to our Vice Chair, Mr. Carmichael. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our guests for your work today. I want to join my colleague, Mr. Albus, and just comment briefly on the clean opinion that Ms. Cheng you've been referring to, and send our thanks and congratulations to those people behind the scenes who do all the hard work to get it to that level, so that when you go in with an audit team, you have good data, good information to work with. So please extend our thanks to them as well. I wanted to begin by talking about the results that were posted in this report. The public accounts state that the Canadian economy posted modest growth over the course of 2012 and the first half of 2013, and that Canada recorded one of the best performances among G7 countries. Wonder if you can comment on what factors contributed to that growth, and perhaps some personal opinion, and maybe Mr. Ralston, if I could start with you on that, and then we could, whoever of your colleagues would like to join in.
Mr. President, I think perhaps we could invite our colleagues from the Department of Finance to comment on that.
Mike, over to you, Mr. Robidoux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the performance, despite global growth being, again, fairly weak over that year we referred to, 12-13. Canadian economy, relatively to others, advanced economy, has been doing still very well. Again, it reflects, despite exports being fairly weak in that year, because, again, of these global development, domestic economy, which is consumption, investment by business, has been fairly strong in Canada. Housing sector, it was kind of slowing already there at that moment, but was also contributing to growth. So those domestic kind of conditions were good and supported the economy through that year. And as a result, as the many of our documents shows, since the beginning of the recovery, Canada has been doing, in fact, the best country in the G7 relatively to employment gain or GDP gain. So effectively, we're been doing fairly well. And again, it's reflect domestic economy more than the export side, which has been, partially that year, fairly weak.
Well, thank you, Mr. Robidoux. And I think that's an important point to make. Clearly, we've come out of a 2 or 3 year decline in 07, 8, 9 that was very challenging. And as our economy recovers, it's important that we recognize that our economy is strong. It's not without its challenges in the future, and we want to make sure that we have our eye on the ball. But I think your point is well stated, that it's showing good signs and signals the recovery is still underway. According to the OECD, you talk about the G7, Canada's total government net to GDP ratio stood at 34.5% in 2012, and which was by far the lowest of our G7 partners. And I wonder if you might comment on the factors that contribute to that, particularly when we look globally and we see debt issues that are of concern on the horizon in other countries. I don't want to focus on them, I want to focus on us. But I get the impression from this information and this data that we're in pretty good shape.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sir. We're doing pretty well there too, compared to other G7 countries, compared to most advanced economies, although there's also other advanced economies that do well. In that respect, fairly small countries. But with respect to Canada, to explain that again, this includes federal government, all the provincial governments, and the Canada Pension Plan and Quebec Pension Plan. So all these levels of government are included in that to make sure that things are comparable across country. It's compiled by the OECD to trying to achieve the best comparability across countries. So it reflects a fairly low debt at the federal level, a fairly low debt in most provinces. Some provinces are almost in surplus. And also it reflects net asset in Canada Pension Plan and Quebec Pension Plan to pay for future benefits of Canadians. So I would say that a stark difference beyond the low debt of both federal and provincial government, a stark difference is the CPP and the QPP. Canada is one of the few countries that has in fact set aside funds to pay for future pension of Canadians. Very few countries do that, indeed, although it's the right
Sorry,
thing
Mr. Carmichael, time's expired. Time flies when you're having fun. It does. There'll be other rounds. Over now to Mr. Harris. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone for being here. I want to go back to Department of National Defence and reading through 2.41. There's a new resource management system being put in place that was due to be completed by December 2013. Is that part of what's been pushed back to 2016, or is it something else? Is it the whole thing that's been pushed back?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the time when we completed the audit, the department did not give us a firm deadline in terms of when they think that would be completed. Subsequent to that, and in the response that they provided to this particular committee, they indicate that they are on track. That means they should be able to complete that by December of 2013, which is basically next month.
That's very good to hear, because that seems that will solve many of the problems with asset management and pooled items that's been happening. Now, it does mention that there was a recommendation made to put interim controls in place. Were appropriate interim controls put in place to minimize the challenges that D&D was having?
So, Mr. Chair, in terms of 2012-13, the audit that we just completed, those mitigating measures were not adequately put in place. That's why we were continuing to find errors. In the report here, we indicate that they really need to put in some compensating controls, and we made some suggestions in terms of things that they could do and should do. Those elements seem to be reflected in their work plan, and for those, they seem to go out to 2016 and maybe even 2017. So that's in the response that was provided to this committee. We basically just got a copy of it ourselves, so we haven't really looked at it closely, and it will be part of the audit that we would do in 2013-14.
Okay, it's good to hear that the Auditor General's office is going to stay on top of that, because, of course, in continuing to find errors, requiring numerous adjustments relating to valuation, completeness, accuracy of quantities. I mean, these are all things that take time, and of course, time in this case is money. Has an evaluation been done of what cost to Canadians this delay has caused and these problems has caused? Because even just tracking them is taking more time. Do we have evaluation of how much time and money has been spent on that?
Mr. Chair, that's not really part of the scope of the financial audit, so we don't have any data of that kind.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, with the transition to accrued accounting, how long would it take most departments to complete that? Because you said it's the Department of National Defence is much larger than the other departments. Is the amount of time that's been taken appropriate for that size of an organization?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a specific number in mind, but 10 years seems like a long time. And from our perspective, we feel that they should be able to get farther along within a 10-year time span. Not too many other departments would have lingering issues of this kind. Otherwise, we would have noted them in the observations to the public accounts. So defense is kind of a bit of a unique entity that way.
Of course, governing being about priorities, do you think additional priority placement by the government on this issue would help to speed matters up?
It is, Mr. Chair, it is difficult to talk about priorities without sort of comparing to what else we're looking at. But certainly from a financial reporting point of view, and I think it's well recognized and generally acknowledged that the public accounts is an important accountability document of the government. So it stands to have certain priority, and to do that right, part of it is to make sure that the inventory are appropriately valued and reported. So that is a weakness that we have in our statements right now. Not to the extent that it was material, otherwise we would have difficulty providing a clean opinion, but nonetheless it's still an important item.
Thank you. Yes, I mean it's a testament to the exceptional work that's been done by all the offices involved and by public servants that there aren't that many weaknesses to be found in the report. And certainly I'd like to commend the work that everyone that's been involved in this has done. And being new to the committee, it's a little hefty to get involved with for the first time. So I'm going to leave actually my question there, and I'm sure we might have a chance to come back around.
Sure. Yeah, you were down to less than half a minute anyway. Thank you very much. And over to Mr. Hayes, who now has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking at the analysis that was done. So this was probably directed to finance officials. Specifically, trying to understand the significance of the interest ratio. I'm noticing in 1990-91, this ratio was as high as 37.6%. And in 2011-2012, our government brought it down to 12.5%, and it was further reduced to 11.4% in 2013, according to the analysis. So I think, by looking at that, that's probably a good thing. But I'd like you to, elaborate for me, what is the significance of a lower interest ratio to Canadians?
Thank you, Chair. Well, the best way to describe the importance of that for every Canadian, I guess, is to consider that back in these days, effectively 1/3 of every dollar in tax collected by the government was used to pay down interest services on the debt. So it was not directly toward services, current services, or used, for example, to fund new programs or to reduce taxes. It was used to just pay down interest on the debt. As of now, as you said, we are down to 11%, about 11%, so only 1 on 10 of each dollar about we collect through taxes is used to service the debt, which is, again, allowing more of the revenues to be directed toward services to Canadians, or in fact to be used to reduce taxes so people, Canadians, pay less taxes. So this is the main effect of that reduction in that interest rate ratio on for Canadians and the economy in general.
So in line with that, sir, I noticed public debt charges from 2010 or 2011, 2012 to 2012, 2013 decreased by $1.9 billion. What would be the reasoning behind the decrease in public debt charges?
For 2012-13, it's basically there was a small increase in the size of the debt because of the deficit that was more than offset by lower effective interest rate because of the fall in interest rate we have been observed through that whole year. It's explained the fall in interest rate.
So I guess if we had an interest rate increase and had to reorganize our debt, that would be quite a risk.
You're perfectly right. If we don't eliminate the deficit before interest rates are increasing, it will in fact compound together and create more pressure on the fiscal framework.
So I guess a deficit reduction action plan is very, very significant. I want to again go to page 1.3, and it speaks to nominal GDP growth. And there's a chart on there, And it shows in June 2013, nominal GDP growth was 3.1%. Now, is this chart specific to Canadian nominal GDP growth, or is this a global figure in terms of GDP growth?
Mr. Chair, this is for Canada. This table tried to explain what happened in between the beginning of the year when we did budget 2012 and when we closed the account, and how nominal GDP has evolved compared to what was expected. So we're expecting 4.6%, and we end up in March and June at 3.1, and then a bit up at 3.4. So the essence of that is that the nominal GDP is essentially the tax base. So if you get less nominal GDP, you get less tax revenue. So this has affected our expectation for tax revenue through the year. We had less at the end of the year than what we thought we would have at the beginning of the year.
And when we look at our trade with other countries in terms of the GDP of another country and how it's impacted, say, for example, the United States, if their GDP was going down, I expect that would have a dramatic impact on Canada's economy. And there's a sense that says to me that means that we need to diversify our economy and move to trade with other countries, because we can't be solely reliant upon the United States. Would you agree with that comment?
I think the government would surely agree with that, and most people would agree with the idea that we need to diversify our trade to ensure that we are not at the stage of any development that's happening in U.S. So diversifying the recent agreement with Europe in that respect is very useful to try to diversify our trade, and obviously diversifying toward Asia would be quite important for Canada too, as Asia is the is the place where in the future growth will be and where the demand for goods will be. So connecting Canadian exporters and producers with Asia and Europe is very good news to diversify trade. It's fairly viewed in the public domain as being something that is good to achieve. Not necessarily easy to achieve, but very good to achieve.
Thank you, Mr.
Time
Chair.
expired. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. And now over to Ms. Duncan, and you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of you for your work and for coming today. I'm new. Is the Auditor General's Office receiving enough information from the government in order for the Auditor General's Office to do its work?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have received excellent cooperation from both the Controller General's Office as well as all the line departments and agencies. So there are no issues of any concern that I would bring to the table.
Thank you. Performance audits contain recommendations for addressing the most serious deficiencies identified. How do you develop recommendations, and how do you ensure that the department implements your recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So similar to the private sector, usually what the auditors do would be provide room for improvement and providing pointers to help management consider areas to make changes so that the systems and the controls could be better for the next time around. In terms of the financial audit and the public accounts audit, they are reporting at different levels. If we start to look at a particular scenario in terms of a revenue stream or an expenditure stream, and we notice that there are some shortcomings, then we would form a view as to how serious that is. If it's something that is really quite serious and to the point that we would consider it a significant deficiency, we would take it to what we consider the signatories. We have an exit meeting with the 4 signatories. They are the Deputy Minister of Finance, the Deputy Receiver General, the Controller General, and the Secretary of the Treasury Board. We would report to them that here are some of the weaknesses that you really should know about. It's pan-government or it's significant enough that at the center you really should know. The next level down would be issues that are not as significant. So, for example, some of the issues relating to national defense that you see in part here, the audit team that audits the Department of Finance, the Department of National Defense, would provide a management letter. So then in writing, we would write to the Deputy Minister indicating that as a result of doing the audit, not that we go out to specifically assess controls, but we notice that here are some areas that you should improve upon or could improve upon, and we would write to the Deputy Minister to do that.
Thank you. Can I step in? How do you ensure that the departments implement your recommendations? You've talked, I mean, for 10 years, national defense, we haven't seen those changes. So how do we ensure that? And do you have recommendations for that?
We do have some success story along the way. As I pointed out, we have very good working relationship with the Controller General's office. So if you take an example, or other departments for that matter, if you take an example, if you go back to the observation several years ago, tax revenue, estimation of tax revenue was on the block. We talked about things that would be better to be able to assess tax revenue and estimate the amounts, and they're not on the list anymore.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt. The question is, how do you ensure, without examples, how do you ensure that the departments implement your recommendations?
What we do is we tend to present the results to senior management, and where the department would allow us to do so, we would go to the departmental audit committee as well to explain some of the differences and some of the weaknesses in their area and encourage them to do that. Like any other recommendations in performance audit reports, we do not have the authority to require departments and agencies to take certain action. But the reason I mentioned the center is because often the Controller General's office could also influence the department to actually encourage them to make those adjustments and changes.
Thank you. You said where the department allows us to come in. Could you expand on that?
What I was referring to are departmental audit committees. They're advisory in nature to Deputy Minister. So it's not a forum that we naturally would go. But in some cases, the departments do invite us to attend the departmental audit committee so that we can explain the audit findings. And if we have the occasion to do so, we would highlight any improvements for them to know so that they can advise the Deputy Minister as well.
Can the Auditor General reports mention a point person responsible for implementing recommendations in each department that the committee could regularly go back to follow up on the implementations of those recommendations, like a point position?
Mr. Chair, we tend not to do that. If you follow the concept of the accounting officer, really it's the Deputy Minister. So when we direct a recommendation to a specific department, it's addressed to the Deputy Minister. He or she has the responsibility to make sure that the mandate, the operations, and all the all-with-alls are properly executed. So we go back to the Deputy Minister. And for that reason, the management letters usually are addressed directly to the Deputy Minister as well.
Sorry, time has expired. Thank you. Over now to Mr. Woodworth. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and my thanks to all of the witnesses for your attendance. I know that collectively you all have your finger on the pulse of the government's finances, and it's great to hear from you. I have questions regarding the discussion and analysis in Section 1 of Volume 1 of the Public Accounts, and I'm going to direct them to Mr. Ralston. I think, unless I'm told that they're authored by another department or agency. And I'm specifically going to look at the last paragraph on the left-hand side of page 1.3. The question I have revolves around a comment that I've heard from some opposition members and others, in which the government is accused of deliberately underestimating revenues so as to create a better financial picture when the numbers eventually turn out. And so looking at that paragraph that I've just referenced, I want to ask you, did you find the government's 2012 to 2013 downward adjustment for risk to revenues to be unnecessarily exaggerated?
Again, I think this is probably a question that should be addressed to the Department of Finance. I'll just point out that our involvement, as has been outlined so far, is to really look at the actual results. The notion of comparisons of budget to actuals and the any are best addressed by the Department of Finance.
Well, I'm actually looking at the observation in that paragraph, and it seems to suggest to me that, in fact, the government allowed for a $3 billion downward adjustment for risk to revenues, but in fact that only was not exaggerated. It was in fact not sufficient. Now, if you're not familiar with that paragraph, I'll transfer my questions to Mr. Robideau. Would that be better?
I think that would be better.
Can you comment on that, Mr. Robideau? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The government, as for a number of years, decided to put an adjustment for risk, a provision in the fiscal framework of $3 billion per year to dodge against unexpected economic shocks. And effectively in 2012-13, as I was mentioning before, nominal GDP has been reduced significantly through the year because of global development and fairly weak commodity prices and weak domestic prices. So what this paragraph is saying that in principle we adjust our revenues down by $3 billion. So if the shock is within this $3 billion, our revenue will be in line with what we expected. In this case, the fall in GDP was enough important to go beyond the $3 billion, which forced us to reduce our forecast for revenues. I guess it speaks to itself that the $3 billion is in some years and sometimes not enough to cover for potential risk that we face.
Is it safe to say it's in fact just prudent management and budgeting, and when you're in uncertain economic times?
I would fully support this. Yes,
Thank you.
This is a prudent approach to budgeting, and that it's supported by the IMF, it's supported by private sector economists that we consult for, and the OECD. So this is always viewed as a very appropriate and prudent approach to budgeting.
So I'd like next to draw attention to the chart on page 1.7, and I'll stick with you, Mr. Robideau, about that. Sometimes we hear the accusation that the government is slashing government transfers and expenditures and seriously impairing government operations. And yet when I look at the total expenses comparison from 2011-12 to 2012-13, I see in fact that there's been an overall very modest or small increase. Does that suggest to you that there's no wholesale slashing going on in the government?
Well, I would say that the government has a plan to return to balance. Part of that plan is to control spending, and I would say that there is some control of spending for sure. Slashing it, I will not comment on that word, but if we go into details and we look at transfer to persons, transfer to other level of government, those in fact spending has been growing year after year. And the part that is kind of more stable or slightly declining is direct program spending. Overall, you are right that spending has been stable. In fact, in periods they have been increasing. So it's a fact of life that
Woodworth, time has expired, sir.
Spending is not falling.
Very good. Thank you. Over now to Monsieur Giguère. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank all the witnesses who have come here to help us to understand these financial statements that are fairly complex. Page 117, table 1.3. We see something here that seems rather strange. The net debt at the beginning of the fiscal year, it increased by $20 billion, and you come up with a total of $651 billion. But the problem is, that is from 640 billion to 651. This is a discrepancy. Then, can you explain to us where this, how we can explain this discrepancy of 4,678,000? Mr. Robideau.
Maybe my colleague from the
Mr. Ralston? You want to answer that, Mr. Ralston?
Yes, I think, if I understand the question, we did mention there were a couple of accounting policy changes that resulted in adjustments to prior figures, and I think the member may be seeing the impact.
J'ai compris ça.
Yes, this is something that I understood, and I did check into what you said. On page 214, we do see the correction. But the correction is shown on the top of the page. $1,347 billion. The work was done, and the amount is shown. This is the correct amount. What I see is a discrepancy of over $4 million, and I cannot find any accounting for it. Normally, we can expect to see some typographical errors, sometimes the small printing mistakes. These are things that can be easily corrected. But this $4 billion is not a figure that I can find anywhere. And as I said, in page 214, there is a correction that is shown, and an amount of $1 billion and some, and that is shown at the top of the page.
Just for 1 second, please.
Sure.
Okay.
More reasonable period. Yes.
Assurer qu'on regarde bien la bonne année. On parle de 2012.
Oui.
You're referring to 2012.
He said yes.
I'm sorry that would it be possible for us to do a follow-up and respond to that? We're having a little difficulty following the numbers.
Let me put it to the member. Monsieur, the witnesses are asking if it's okay if they come back later with an answer, or you can continue to pursue it now. It's your choice.
Could you, again, désolé, est-ce que vous pouvez l'expliquer encore une fois, lentement?
Could you explain it perhaps a bit more slowly?
On the question. Is that part of it? All right, let's take another stab at that, Mr. Giguère. If you could explain it once more succinctly, in the hopes that they'll grasp the essence of your question, and then I think they'd like to respond. So you want to try again with your question?
Essentiellement, le problème.
Basically, the problem is because the figures do not correspond with what you gave me. There's a mistake of $4 billion in 2012. You can see that you have to add $616 billion to 29 million, and you come up with a surprising figure of $651 billion, 535 million. Whereas if you were to add the other figures, it would come up to 646 billion. This is a discrepancy then of 4 billion and some. I'd like to know what accounts for this. If it's a simple mistake, printing mistake, or
then hopefully as clear an answer. Do we understand the question? Yes, I'm seeing heads nodding. Do we have an answer? Working on it. All right. Stop the clock.
To our knowledge,
there's no problem there.
Sorry.
It just, there's no mistake, it just add up. So, en français, si on commence par la ligne en haut, on a...
If we look at the top line, you see 620 billion, 621 billion. The second line, 621, yes, but what I said, the problem remains. This is something that I followed and understand. But the fact is you're referring to a debt of 600, there's always this discrepancy of 4 million that is not being explained, or billion rather. It's transformed at one point. I'd like to know where this amount comes from. I think that we can probably give them some time so that they can provide us with an answer. That's what I suggest. I would suggest that we give them the time and they can come back with a more detailed answer.
Alex seemed to have a bit of a handle on. I'm going to ask him to just give his thought as he sees it. Please, Alex, if you would. Just what you mentioned to me.
Oh, I was just pointing out to you, Mr. Chair, that there seems to be the members pointing to a difference between the net debt at the end of 2011 and the opening debt at the beginning of 2012. And the member seems to be saying that the note provided doesn't explain the difference between the net debt at the 1 year and the beginning opening debt at the following year.
Okay, thanks. Is that accurate, Monsieur? Yes. Do we understand the question now? Can we get a clear answer?
We're working on it. At the moment, because it goes back to a previous year, I'm afraid we don't have that one at the tip of our fingers, but we'll be happy to track it down.
Monsieur Robidoux.
To have the right answer, but I think the answer is in the note 1 to the table. The restatement made these year net balance for both entry and exit, and the end of year and the beginning of year is different because of the restatement. I'm quite sure it's that, but we'll double check and get with an answer.
All right. So I'm going to have to, time has expired. I have been shutting down your time when they've been huddling. So this is a fair representation of your time, sir. I'm sorry. You have two choices. You can either get in the next round and continue to ask, or you can follow up with them. They did make a commitment. They would get you an answer. If you're not getting satisfactory answers, you have the right to come back to this committee and say, I'm not getting the answers they committed to give me. That's your procedure. Okay, sir?
Je peux poser encore une autre question?
Do I have time for another question?
Round, you'll have the floor, and you can have at her. Okay, with that, then we'll move along. Mr. Shipley, you now have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses all, for coming out. I wanted just to Mr. Robideau in Finance. Part of what we know in terms of our finances in Canada, and you made some earlier reference in terms of explanation, but at the end of March of this year, 2013, it's my understanding that our deficit had hit a figure of around something less than $19 billion. I think about 18.9 for our fiscal year ending March 31st of 2013. Now, in the budgetary information that's in the report, there was a budgeted deficit projection of $26.3 billion that was set out in 2011, 2012. And there was earlier comments about we're in a time, and I think there's no surprise to that. We're in a time, though we're out of coming out of the recession and we're out of it. Those of us know that the global growth is still fairly weak. Exports, we need to continue to work while the diversification in terms of our agreements to export into more countries rather than just to our closest partner and neighbor across to the south. We've also looked at, in terms of the numbers, I believe, in here, that revenues increased an amount of about $7.5 billion. I think that's about 3% from 2011 to 2012. I'm just trying to grasp this, where actually our deficit has come down. Our revenues have increased at a time where global problems, as we know, still strongly exist. I guess it's reflecting higher tax revenues, and yet we're at a time where taxes in Canada are actually about a 50-year low in terms of what is charged against individuals, and particularly in my riding, I think not only individuals but small businesses, which make up about 98% of the economy in our country. And I'm just trying to understand what that means to a family, what that means to a small business, but actually how does that work? Because it seems counterproductive. In a time of economic growth and slowness, you've had increases in revenue, lower taxes, and yet we've been able to pay down the deficit, Canada has, ahead of what we're projecting in our budget. I'm just wondering, is there any comments in terms of
how that actually works and maybe Economics 101 or something, so most of us could understand that?
Mr. Chair, I will do my best. Again, total revenues, which include tax revenues and non-tax revenues, went up, as you said, by $7.5 billion in fiscal year 2012-13. Again, this reflects an increase in GDP, the base of nominal GDP, the base of taxation. So the tax rate have been kept stable in that year. What happened is that the pie has been growing, and this kind of bring higher revenues. So this explained that more or less. And in that same year, which kind of lead with a growth, a total revenue of 3%, which was more or less aligned with the growth in the base. And spending has been fairly flat that last year, so this led to an improvement in a reduction in the deficit. So I hope this is helping you, but it's not an increase in the tax rate for sure. It was just an increase in the pie that is taxable.
Yeah. I think it also helps, and thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Robideau, that in Canada actually business is working, and that we're able to generate, even with a lower tax rate for over the number of years, that actually we're able to increase the amount of revenues, and which takes me to the comments of the Comptroller General. Now, I just want to understand a little bit, Mr. Ralston. You mentioned in your opening statement that the government retroactively adopted new standards for the public sector accounting regarding the presentation of certain tax expenditures. Why was this done? Just to help us to understand for us, how was it done, or why, or should I say, why was it done? What would be the impact of this reclassification?
Mr. Chair, so the change was made pursuant to a change in the a change or a new accounting standard issued by the Public Sector Accounting Board. So the Public Sector Accounting Board is an independent standard setter for governments in Canada, and the stated accounting policies of the federal government are based on those standards. Okay. So what that standard was trying to reflect, or does reflect, is that not all so-called tax expenditures have similar characteristics and purposes. As I said in my opening statement, some are effectively almost like a substitute for a check. They are a transfer that happens to be administered through the tax system. Others are effectively rate reductions, or as the term I used earlier was a tax concession. Well, so what the standard did was start to differentiate between those two kinds of tax expenditures. So the former one, where the characteristics were very similar to a cash transfer, we now show them as if they were a cash transfer. And for the ones that are more reflective of a rate reduction, we show them, as we always have, as a lower an offset to tax revenue. Now, the impact of that change is to both because things that were formerly deducted from revenue are now shown gross. So you see an increase in tax revenue with a corresponding increase in the expenditure. The net effect is zero. That's why I mentioned that there is no impact on the bottom line, but it shows more faithfully the nature of the underlying activity.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Moving along now, back to Ms. Duncan. You have the floor again, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. I'm concerned that there's little follow-up in terms of there's an audit, and a few years later there's another audit, and we learn the recommendations aren't implemented. Would it be possible to table with the committee what's done to ensure the recommendations are followed up? Is that possible?
It's for me?
Please. Is that possible table with the committee?
Mr. Chair, the management letters I intended as a management communication. It was never, I guess, drafted or written with the mind that it was going to go to a full committee discussion. Like
no, that's, sorry, not what I'm asking.
That,
just what is the process for follow-up to ensure that recommendations are implemented?
You're referring to our recommendations?
Yeah, or is there no process?
Well, maybe I think Ms. Chang has indicated that first of all, there's there are in your first questions you referenced performance audits. I think it's important to point out that this would not be classified as a performance audit. This is an audit of financial statements.
Notwithstanding
that, I mean, we as we see in the observations attached to this, the Auditor General does make recommendations.
It's the follow-up piece.
So what we do inside a department when we receive an Auditor General's recommendation is, first of all, they are often point to a direction rather than specific actions. So we have to translate that into some sort of specific action. We would make a plan. We would then execute the plan. Some mention was made of audit committees. Perhaps I can just explain the role of an audit committee in this process, because they do have a role.
I'm concerned that it's been 10 years for one group where there are serious concerns, and it's going to be another 3 years. Is it possible to table what the follow-up process is?
Are you asking for a process in general? I thought your question was about a process in general. Now you're returning to one specific instance. So perhaps if you wish to know about then, all right. So the process in general, as I started to say.
No, I asked if it could be tabled with the committee.
Certainly.
Thank you. How accurate do the government's consolidated financial statements have to be to receive a clean audit opinion?
In order to, Mr. Chair, in order to receive a clean opinion, we have to conduct sufficient audit procedures to make sure that there are no material misstatements. So in that process, what we do is we look at the different cycles of businesses, we look at the various financial statement line items, and we would have audit procedures to audit them. Because the Government of Canada is really comprised of many activities out of over 100 departments and agencies, we then decide on the larger ones that we would do more work, and the smaller ones stands to reason that we would do less work. So we roll up all of those findings into an overall account to sort of say what are some of the differences that we found. For example, in concluding the 2011, 2012, 2013 public accounts, we had discussion with government, and the government made $1.5 billion worth of adjustments to the financial statements in terms of the statement package that you see here. So those differences, when we find differences, we discuss it with management and make sure they understand why we say that those are the differences. When they come to an agreement on that, they make adjustments to the financial statements.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that. Is the balanced budget in 2015-16 fiscal year realistic?
That would not be something that is within the scope of the audit of the public accounts.
Fair enough.
No.
Can you table with the committee what is the process, or what are the requirements to receive that clean audit opinion?
That would be very difficult to sort of table a process as such. Essentially, in the auditor's report, we clearly indicate that we follow Canadian auditing standards. So essentially, we'd be tabling the standards of the standard setter.
No,
so
that's fine.
It's not a practical way to help the committee, I don't think.
And then in your report, you say we continue to find significant errors. Can you elaborate, please?
Well, this would be when we conduct the inventory observation at year-end or close to year-end at D&D. We notice that there are quantification differences, and we also notice that there are pricing differences. So when we actually accumulate those kind of findings, that they amount to fairly significant differences. Over 100 million, for example, in the case of D&D. Overall, the adjustments are about 1.5 billion, and I think D&D shares about 200-300 million, round about there.
Okay, sorry, time has expired. Thank you. Over now to Mr. Woodworth. You, sir, have the floor again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Et encore une fois, Monsieur Robideau, j'ai des questions pour...
Once again, Mr. Robideau, I have questions for you, but I don't intend to put these questions in French.
The table at the top right of page 1.9, which seems to me to show accumulated deficit as a percentage of GDP. And first of all, my observation is that that has essentially flatlined since the onset of the recession in 2009-2010. Am I reading that correctly?
Sorry, this is the, you read correctly, but you don't, you think this is the deficit, this is the debt.
Accumulated deficit.
Accumulated deficit is nothing else than, it's the standard for debt.
Yes, fine enough, as a percentage of GDP.
Yeah.
And I understand that, in fact, the accumulated deficit goes up or has gone up in each year, but so has the GDP. And so that's why it's essentially flatlined. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And it seems to me also that it remains at a level which is still a little slightly lower than the 2005-2006 year. Is that correct?
I will have to verify that. I don't have the numbers with me. It's slightly below by 1 percentage point.
Right. And so the government has actually been able to achieve a flatlined accumulated deficit as a percentage of GDP, notwithstanding the worldwide economic recession and notwithstanding a rather large array of tax reductions. Is that a correct statement?
That's accurate.
All right, thank you. And I know that I am very proud of that achievement, but since you're a civil servant, I won't ask you to express your pride in it. I want to switch now for a moment to Mr. Ralston, because I was intrigued by your comments regarding the new standards of public sector, of the Public Sector Accounting Board regarding tax expenditures no longer netted against tax revenues but reported as transfer payment expenses. And this applies to tax expenditures that provide a financial benefit through the tax system. And I just want to make sure I understand that, because when I read that, I think about refundable tax credits, for example. Is that a correct interpretation of that?
Yeah, that would be an example.
All right. So, for example, the child tax benefit, is that an example of the kind of thing we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And in effect, it's not actually reducing anyone's taxes. It's putting it into their hands as a transfer. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes, using the tax system as a delivery mechanism.
Correct. But still not a tax reduction so much as a transfer of wealth, if you like, to the recipients. Is that, am I getting it?
Well, it's, as I say, it puts a check in their hands. Yeah.
Okay. And so it kind of makes sense to me that this does not come out as a net of tax revenue, but rather as a transfer. Is that the reasoning for this, or can you elaborate on the reason why this change is being made?
No, as I mentioned, that is my understanding of the reason behind the change in the standard. It is meant to reflect better the underlying nature of the transaction.
Better and more accurately the underlying nature of the transaction?
Well, I think it would have always been accurately computed. It's just really presentational. It's more visible this way, and sort of groups like with like.
All right. And I guess the other area of interest that is top of my mind as a new member of the committee is the preparation of these public accounts. So I want to ask you in a moment to just sort of tell me how your department meets that monumental challenge. But maybe before I do, I should just clear up one thing that's still bothering me. What department actually is the author of the discussion and analysis that I have been referring to? It didn't seem to be your department. You referred me to Mr. Robideau. Does the Finance Department write this discussion and analysis?
Yes, to the extent that much of it is the interpretation of the numbers rather than the computation or compilation, and so their expertise is in that area. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, time has expired, sir. Thank you. Now, I'm advised by the official opposition that this being an NDP speaking slot, that in light of staff having a response to Mr. Giguère's question, then I'm going to permit that response to be given now in this slot, and Mr. Giguère can then pick up the discussion for the balance of the time allotted. So, with that, I turn the floor over to whoever is going to provide an answer.
Merci, Monsieur Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Referring to is $3.3 billion. And what happened is we should actually have put a little memo at the bottom of this to state, if you recall in the public accounts last year, what actually happened, a lot of the GBEs, they converted to international financial reporting standards. And as such, there was an adjustment of $3.3 billion that was booked in the prior year. Essentially what that was the biggest component was Canada Post, where basically they had like some $3 billion. They fully recognized their pension obligation on their books. So what happened, that restatement was done in the prior year. So when you're looking at the number, the closing number at the end of 2011, that is exactly the number that we closed with. Last year, because of this restatement, the 616 became 620 once we had the adjustment. So to make this more clear, we should have actually made a note of it to disclose the fact that the 620 was a restated amount, taking into consideration that adjustment, one-time adjustment that was done in the prior year.
Mr. Giguère, you have the floor, sir.
Si je comprends bien, on vient de...
As I understand, a figure has just been quoted that I have been unable to find, that I cannot check. But even if you make an adjustment for 3.6, this works out. It may in fact be correct, but I would like to have a confirmation of this figure, because you've come up with a figure that is nowhere reflected in the document. Yes, what happened is that when we did produce these financial statements this year, this particular adjustment had been made in the previous year. And if you look at the public accounts, I have them with me. I can show you exactly where this was done. In carrying it over this year, we used the new figure and we didn't show the 3.3. However, I can show you where it comes from. Yes, I am satisfied, Mr. Chairman. May I ask another question? In Chapter 6, interest-bearing debt, in Table 6.1, you indicate a debt, bond debt, of $469 billion, more or less. You refer in 6.2 and at 6.2, this $469 billion is transformed into $477 billion. Once again, there is a discrepancy of $8 billion, amount that is not shown. It's the same problem. There's some missing information apparently that was not included. 31st of March 2013, you show $469 billion, 39 million, and the upper column, far right. And this figure does not reappear in Table 6.2, but rather is shown as 477 billion. It's a little bit higher on the other page. If you look at page 6.4, there is an amount of 469, 3 columns higher. 69, rather. No, it's 468. Didn't you say 469 billion? On the following page, marketing bonds payable in Canadian currency, 469. I think that there may be a mistake in the English and French versions. We're looking at the English one. It is correct that in the French text, it would appear that the figure is not the same. So this is a mistake that we are going to have to correct. But you are right. If we check it with the English version, then the figures are correct. So you will be making a you're correcting the French text, yes, as you'll be correcting also the discrepancy, the previous one, that was not shown. Yes, in the note. Yes, we'll be adding a note, if you wish, to explain this particular adjustment so that it is clearer. Good.
Yeah, it's not very often they make mistakes. It's even less time that it gets picked up. Well done. I mean, full marks. That's good work. Over now to Mr. Carmichael. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So perhaps a little less technical. I wonder I'm on page, oops, my machine just went off on me. On page 1.7 or section 1.7, you have a number of you have a chart there and a graph on the revenue ratios. And you talk about, as I look at it, I'm looking for clarity and perhaps a brief explanation. I presume this is Mr. Robideau, but I'm not certain. In that section, I wonder if you could explain why it is the government is taking in what appears to be significantly more tax revenue, and despite there being a reduction in the revenue to GDP ratios. We're down to 14.1%, and I think I understand the ratio, but I wonder if you could just explain that for us.
Mr. Chair, sorry, could you repeat the question exactly?
Yes, sir. If on page 1.5, sorry, my apologies. Were you on 1.7?
I was on 1.7.
That was the problem. Okay, my bad.
I got it.
We're on 1.5, and I'm looking at the income from the income tax revenues, etc., general revenues that are coming in over the past year, looking at the revenue ratio to GDP. And your reference is that it's reduced to 14.1% with significantly more income. Why is that revenue to GDP ratio declining or dropping?
Well, the revenue ratio has been declining essentially because of a reduction in tax rates, both for personal income and for corporate income through that period. Plus, there is the impact of the recession in that year that played some role. But tax reduction has been a significant factor in that, and they have not been increasing since then because the government has not increased tax rate in any way through that period. So it remains stable as a share of GDP.
So then,
basically, taxation is growing more or less in line with GDP.
I hear you. Now, so revenues have been increasing. Tax revenues are increasing, particularly personal and corporate income taxes are all up.
Yep.
And all happening without increase in tax rates. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So that would indicate a fairly strong economy.
A bigger economy.
A bigger economy. Things are working. Thank you. So, as you're saying, it is that public accounts, by showing increased tax revenues, I just want to be real clear, are indicating economic growth. Basically, people and businesses are making more money and they're paying higher taxes just through sheer generation of more income.
Effectively.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Ralston, I just wanted to ask you, sir, with regards to, was that clear? Okay. In your statement, you talked about the two areas that you've made you've adopted new standards in accounting with regards to transfer payments. And I wonder if you could just explain, particularly the second one caught my eye, and I was wondering you talk about the main impact for the government was to stop recognizing advance payments as non-financial assets and to recognize them instead as expenses. The impact to these changes on the financial results was an increase in expense of $500 million. I wonder if you could just explain that accounting change for me as a non-accountant, not a business person. So $500 million is a lot of money. It transitions into greater expense for the government in the past year. Is it significant or not?
So in this case, essentially, the way this type of expenditure would have been shown in the past was as an asset, essentially as a prepaid expense. Now, under the Canadian public sector accounting standards, they have certain, characteristics of what they would like to classify as an asset. So it's very definitional. I think it boils down to a rethinking of whether this particular kind of expenditure really had the underlying characteristics of an asset, or whether it was really an expense of the year in which it was. In other words, if it's an asset, it's got some continuing value to the federal government. It's appearing on would be appearing on our balance sheet. I think what the standard effectively says is that no, this isn't an asset in the sense that the federal government has any access to it. It can't liquidate it. It can't use it. It's really just recognizing that it's parked there until a future time, and then it will be transferred to the recipient. So I think again, it's just a question of the board re-examining the underlying reality and saying no, this really has no. The federal government really has no substantive access to this and can't make use of this asset. Therefore, we should show it as an expense.
Okay, thank you. Time has expired, sorry. Colleagues, we have exhausted the usual rotation for questions and comments. However, there is about 31 minutes remaining on the clock. I'm in the hands of the committee as to whether you would like to continue another round or two, or give every person a shot, or whether you wish to adjourn. I am in your hands. The floor is open to a motion. Mr. Albus.
I'd like to continue going, Mr. Chair.
Good. So by that, are you suggesting that we just continue in the rotation for the time available?
Well, I do know some members have indicated an interest to continue, so do you mind if I just put the next, I believe...
I was just suggesting that for purposes of what we'd follow, we just go back to the beginning of the rotation.
Yep.
And then go down until 5:30 comes?
Yep, that'd be fine.
Does that work? Everybody agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. Do we need a motion? I think there's agreement in the room. Okay, I have agreement. We have a unanimous consent. And so with that, we will continue. And if I'm reading this correctly, Mr. Hayes, you're ready to begin that second round?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you. You now have the floor.
I appreciate it very much.
I can clear my throat a little if you need a moment.
I am well ready.
I know you are.
Always ready. This question will be to finance again. And it's going to speak to our debt. And I think Canadians... I know I want to have a real confidence level in terms of how we're managing our debt. And the sources of debt are significant. I see foreign holdings of government's unmatured debt are estimated at $175.9 billion. And so I'm hoping you can sort of give me an idea who's holding our debt, and what do we have in place in terms of a risk mitigating strategy for our debt?
Well, I guess, Mr. Chair, we have a chart, I believe, but we could essentially only break down between foreigners who owe Canadian debt and Canadian debt owe our debt. So it's between Canadian citizens and foreigners. We don't have another breakdown in that. And I do believe on page 1.10 you have a chart that shows foreign holding of Government of Canada unmatured debt, and it has been increasing as we have issued more debt since the recession, from I would say low of 15s or in the range of 15% to 25% of the debt. So I would say 25% of our debt is owned by foreigners and 75% of our debt is owned by Canadians. And the share of foreigners has been increasing to this year, following a reduction before that. Again, the reduction before that was just we were not emitting a lot of new debt at some point because we had a balanced budget or surpluses in many of these years. With the crisis, we had suddenly an increase in emissions, and again, giving Canada's very good fiscal situation across the world. It was the case before the recession. It's even more the case now. Foreigners are quite interested in buying Canadian debt, and we have seen that on market that foreigners are buying Canadian debt, and this is what we have observed there.
I'll go a little further, because I was hoping you'd actually jump into this. The Department of Finance has a debt management strategy, and I think that's where I was trying to lead with this question, to give me a sense of confidence that, what was involved in terms of developing a debt management strategy, what does it consist of, and, will that strategy give Canadians a level of confidence that the government is managing its debt in a way that reduces risk to Canadian taxpayers?
I will let my colleague, Doug Nevesil, answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If I may, you're absolutely right that the government has a debt management strategy which is published as an annex to the budget every year and presented before Parliament. The objective of the debt management strategy is to raise stable, low-cost funding while ensuring a well-functioning Government of Canada securities market. So there isn't a strategy to pursue or target specific types of issuance. It's to get the lowest cost possible, appropriate debt structure. And as Benoit mentioned, being one of the few AAA credits in the global economy at the moment with a good fiscal situation, there is a lot of demand for Canadian securities, particularly amongst central banks, sovereign wealth funds that are reallocating their portfolios towards a fairly secure asset.
Do I still have time? Just to elaborate a little bit more, in terms of developing this strategy, is this done internally, or do you seek expert advice?
It is determined internally. It's also determined in consultation with the Bank of Canada, who is the fiscal agent for the Canadian, and is based on consultation with market participants, investors. There's a fairly significant investor relations program to make sure that we are tapping investor demand appropriately, and as I said, getting the right structure of debt to pursue the objectives of the strategy.
And one more small question, again on debt, and this is something I don't quite understand. And I'll read it to you. It states the average effective interest rate on the government's interest-bearing debt in 2012-2013 was 3.4%, down from 3.8% in 2011-2012. The average effective interest rate on unmatured debt in 2012-2013 was 2.7%. And here's the next one that I don't understand. While the average effective interest rate on pension and other liabilities was 5.4%. So I'm trying to understand the very significant difference between interest-bearing debt and the interest rate on pension and other liabilities. And that's page, it's 1.12.
Okay, who's got that?
Well, great, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So the interest rate, the effective rates you were mentioning before, 3.4, those are market rates that reflects the structure for debt. So if we have more long-term debt and less short-term debt, this average rate will be higher. If we have more short-term debt, it will be lower. So this reflects two things, the structure of our debt over time, and also the fact that interest rate, both long and short rates, have been falling in recent years. So this is the fall in the effective rate reflects that when we emit new debt, we emit at lower rates than all debt we roll over from the past. So rates have been going down, so the effective rate is falling. Now on the pension, which is your real question, this is used it's a long-term rate, 10-year rate, a 10-year plus, in fact, that we use to book our pension liabilities. So it's not a rate we pay to anybody. It's a rate we use to factor in what is our liabilities in in public accounts. So that rate allows us to calculate the present value of our liabilities and also to basically account for that liabilities over time, both now in the current year and also in the future. So we use that rate to do that. So it's a benchmark rate. It's not something we're paying to anybody. It's a way to ensure our liabilities are recorded in public accounts in an accurate way. And since pension is a long-term liabilities, we use long-term rate to account for that. So it's more a shadow rate, what if, than a real rate.
Okay, thanks very much. No problem. Now, over to Mr. Allen. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To finance, recently there's been talk about lapse spending in departments to the tune of almost $10.9 billion. So I guess the two parts to the question is this higher than you expected? And if so, is there a cause for it, or is there any reason you could point to, or is it one of those, whoops, it happened, we're not sure?
Mr. Chair, yeah, so direct program spending was lower than expected in 2012-13, and at the same time, the department has been lapsing about a bit more than $10 billion compared to their appropriations. So department has been, it's fairly difficult to explain from a forecasting point of view, because the lapse we talk about in our forecast between us at finance, it's the actual lapse. The lapse that has been in the media up to now, it's a cash lapse. Is department go and access cash in a year that they could appropriate to spend, and if they don't spend that, they lapse the money, and this is a cash lapse. That cash lapse is relevant, but it's not the same lapse than we use in our projection, because we need to do a number of accrual adjustments for liabilities, assets, and all that.
Back to that.
So
we're back to the accrual cash thing again, Ms. John. It seems about the debate about accrual versus cash. But I hear what you're saying, Mr.
I
Robideau.
just wanted to highlight that,
Sure.
too, that the two are not the same. But effectively, what happened in 2012-13, we had a lapse assumption on an accrual basis in the projection.
Yeah, and I think you can understand from a parliamentarian's perspective, we're asked to vote on expenditures, and clearly we're asked to vote on a certain amount of money. And then when we find out later on that the amount we were asked to give was exceeded, almost $11 billion actually, isn't a rounding error. And yes, there's some, pieces later on, parts of his, how it lapsed cash and accrual goes back. It gets, quite frankly, it's like sleight of hand sometimes for those who don't quite understand accounting. I get that. But clearly, this is higher than normal. And so I guess the question is, I saw Mr. Ralston sort of give me an indication maybe he wants in on the answer. This is not a normal piece, it's higher. So the question is, is there something specific to this? Is it a one-of? And is there a methodology to try and put in place that says, well, be a little tighter the next time so that we don't get into this shifting of or lapsing of the department expenditures? Mr. Ralston.
Well, so just a couple of general observations to start with. First of all, when you appropriate funds, that represents sort of an upper ceiling. So there's never really an expectation that it will be completely used. Departments are certainly not obligated to spend their entire appropriations, and for certain appropriations, there's a number that are essentially there to cover contingencies, and so if the occasion does not arise to access those contingent funds, they will lapse. So there's always a certain level of lapse that is to be expected. Now in the current in the 2012-13 year, there was the situation arose where the main estimates had been tabled. Then there were some reductions announced in the 2012 budget, and after the appropriations had already been the estimates had been tabled. So what Treasury Board did was to so-called freeze certain of those simply to reflect the update, if you will. And so that generated, that's not the only reason you would freeze allotments, but it was one reason that happened to be present in the year in question. There could be other reasons why you would frozen allotments are used. So in this case, that sort of category covered about 40% of the lapse. There's also, departments have the ability to carry forward a part of their appropriations. So many departments, I certainly remember that I did this when I was a chief financial officer. We plan to carry forward some of the current year's funds into the next year because we have a greater need, say, in a subsequent year than the current year. So that sort of carry forward activity represented about 16%.
My only comment, sir,
Mr. Allen,
is actually it's a greater amount than normal. That's the dilemma.
Please.
Sir, sorry.
Thank you.
That here.
You couldn't hear me? I don't hear that very often.
Well, you're only from Hamilton.
All right. Moving along. Mr. Albus, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to ask a few more questions. But something's still on my mind. You know, my colleague here, Mr. Carmichael, actually raised a really interesting point. We are seeing an increase in personal income tax revenue. We're seeing an increase on the corporate side. Now, I do know there's some loss of revenue, Crown corporations offshore. But those are up higher. And we've seen over the past several years, since 2006, a number of tax reductions, both on the personal income side as well as the corporate side. So, Mr. Robideau, could you just explain how you can have that, where you have increased taxes while you have decreased tax rates? Can you just explain how that would work?
There's two factors that, first, the reduction in tax rate cost as a cost to it. But again, when the economy is growing, this cost will be more than offset by the growing economy. So it's why you end up with still higher revenue despite the fact you reduce taxation rate. Now, it's all depends on how much you reduce taxation rate, but for the tax reduction we had, it was enough to be more than offset by a growing economy. And now there's the other issue that is very difficult to kind of estimate, to get something very precise about it, but there's also this issue and this view among economists that when you reduce tax rates, it leads people to work more if you reduce tax on working. It leads businesses to invest more if you reduce tax on investment and so on. So there's a feedback normally into the economy over time. When you reduce tax rate, you incent people to either save more, invest more, or work more. And so there's potentially some of these second-round effect in these results. We, at least among economists, like to think that these things are there.
Well, I appreciate hearing that, Mr. Chair. Now, I'm going to go to page 1.3, and it's going to be the fourth paragraph down. And basically, it talks about the economic recovery because we're talking about a stronger, recovery. This economic recovery has underpinned a strong rebound in Canada's labour market, with over 1 million more Canadians working now than July 2009, when the recovery began, an increase of 6.1%. And Canada has outperformed all the other G7 economies in economic growth since the start of the global recession, and has recorded the strongest growth in job creation over the recovery. So, in your opinion, sir, what are some of the factors that would have led to this, I would say, at least a foundation for more economic growth, bearing in mind, obviously, our economies are so integrated?
Mr. Chair, again, we believe, this is what we have said in our document, that the strong fundamentals in Canada, be it economic, financial fiscal foundation have led to a relative better performance in the global slowdown and in the recovery than in some other economies, which also reflected in better employment performance than elsewhere and more creation of jobs by Canadian businesses. So clearly the strength of the Canadian economy through that period has not been driven by a strong global economy. We did suffer on the export side, partially in that year, so this was not the source of all that creation. So it's, as I said before, it's domestic economy, and we believe that the strong fundamentals we had entering the crisis and after the crisis help a lot supporting that creation of wealth and jobs. So.
Perfect. No, thank you. And I think that goes back to Mr. Hayes' comment on, needing to open up new markets and your comments on the potential in Asia. Now, you said a strong economy and the fundamentals we have. That, to me, that makes me look at, how we're going to deal with some of the changing demographics as being, because if you have a strong economy, you can afford to be able to look after people through different programs and services. Page 1.7 talks about major transfers to persons. Particularly, I want to go to elderly benefits because I'm from a riding where the demographics, Mr. Chair, we have a lot of seniors in my riding, and it shows that it's gone up 5.8%. In this set of public accounts. Can you also explain some of the other, personal transfers that were increased and how important that would be to a Canadian family?
Well, elderly benefits was one. Clearly, they are indexed to inflation, consumer price inflation, and because of the aging of baby boomers, obviously, there's a lot more every year that pass 65 and receive these payments after 65. So this was one factor that led to that growth of 5.8%. And we expect, in our projection, we expect this kind of 5.6 to be sustained for a number of years. The other transfer employment insurance benefits has been falling through the year. It's transferred to an employee, again, reflecting less unemployed to a large extent. Children benefits, again, it's indexed to CPI, so this has been growing too. And federal transfer to provinces for health, for social transfer, the first one at 6%, the second one at 3%, so it's a strong source of growth for provinces in their revenues, obviously. And I guess I will stop there.
Yes, that's very good. That's very helpful. Thank you so much. And time has expired. So we'll move along over to Monsieur Giguère. You have the floor again, sir.
Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much. On table 1.1, page 1.18, we see that since in the last 10 years, for the loans, placements, and advances, the amounts have exploded.
They went up of $14 billion to $133.34 billion. These amounts are to be found in table 9.3 and page 9.5. $133 billion, $348 million. And the most interesting point here, I think, in very small letters, you see a note that indicates that these loans are accounted for as costs. Is it not correct that there is no inventory in the public accounts? The inventory of the GVN for these investments, then does this not mean that if ever there were to be a loss on these investments, the budgetary surplus that was announced for 2015 could in fact turn into a deficit of $20 billion if the bonds, if these values that are shown here were to lose a part of their value? In other words, the $133 billion is the value of the inventory, but if we had a detailed inventory, we might find out that the value of this stock, the actual market value of the stock, is lesser than the $133 billion indicated. I think that from the Department of Finance, it might perhaps be able to give us an answer on this. Your questions are very good, Mr. Giguère, but once again, I'm not sure that I found the right table. If you could speak more slowly, you were referring to table 1.2, were you? In 1.2, we saw that a reference was made to assets that are referred public enterprises, the investments of $133,348,000,000. This particular detail is to be found on page 9.5. 31st of March 2013, the far right in the bottom, you will find this specific amount, $133 billion. And in 2004, it was 14. Now it has gone up to 133. It's been increased tenfold. And on the bottom of the page, you say, and you have an important note saying that these investments, these loans are accounted for as costs. Nowhere did I find in any of the three volumes reference to the inventory. The inventory of this, the value of this inventory is not shown anywhere. It means, in other words, that there is a risk that when an attempt is made to dispose of this 133 billion, it will in fact not work out to be the as high a value as shown. And this, of course, would mean that it would be shown as a deficit, would be added to the deficit. Well, if indeed there were a change each year, a sale of these assets, the change between the market value and the value shown would have to be reflected. However, what I would like to verify is whether this would have an impact on the accumulated deficit or the debt, or would it be shown as an expense? But potentially, you may be right, every year. And it is also quite possible that some of these assets would have a market value that is higher than what is shown as the book value. This is generally the case. Normally, these assets do increase in value. Yes, the problem is that starting in 2008, there was, in fact, an explosion in this particular budget. This was commercial paper, and you are telling me that it's increasing in value. I would be very surprised. But the problem remains the same. Nowhere in any of these three volumes do we find detailed value of the correct market value, proper market value. I'd like to know whether it can be found. Probably in public accounts. We are dealing with the Crown corporations that have their own accounting methods and, in fact, should show the market value. I think we can follow up on this and attempt to find out what the market value of these particular assets is. And I think that it would probably be possible for certain Crown corporations. Some of them do have their own market value system, and it should be possible to find it. And you will also be adding an inventory? No, there is no connection. We will simply be determining whether the information is available in any other documents. Here, we follow the standards that are required in order to record this.
That also ends our time, colleagues. So on your behalf, I will certainly thank our guests today, our witnesses, and say to you, thank you very much for the answers, for the fulsomeness of your answers. Might I also say, on behalf of Public Accounts, which is the one committee that tries, we don't always succeed, but we try to be as nonpartisan as possible when the moment calls for it. This is one of those moments. You have heard representatives from all three caucuses express to you how proud they are of the documents and the fact that we have what is called our 15th year of unmodified audit opinion. In street lingo, it's a clean audit. And the government of the day gets bragging rights for it. Fair enough. but we all understand that more than one party has been government during the 15 years, and we all understand that this kind of work is the result of the professionalism of our public service. And we are sincere in acknowledging to you how the pride that we have that this document is here unmodified, a clean audit, 15 times in a row. That makes Canada look good, so we feel good about that. Thank you, and please pass on to everyone who had anything to do with this our appreciation for their professionalism. We are lucky to have the public servants that we do. And with that, you are now excused. Colleagues, you are adjourned. This meeting stands adjourned.